Every pilot knows one rule: never break your crew. Captain Carlos Mendez broke that rule, and today, on Flight 332 at 38,000 feet, he's about to learn why that matters, because the flight attendant he made cry in the galley, she's not just a flight attendant, she's an aviation engineer, and in the next hour, when the cabin pressure fails and 390 passengers start gasping for air, he's going to beg her to save him. It's 8:14 a.m. Frankfurt Airport, Gate A58. The Airbus A380 sits massive and gleaming under gray German morning light. Flight 332 to Dubai, 6 hours, 40 minutes, 390 souls on board. The aircraft registration reads D-AIWA. Ground crew loads final cargo. Catering trucks disconnect, jet bridge attached. Inside the terminal, passengers gather. Business travelers check phones. Families organize children. The A380's double-deck cabin promises comfort. Nobody knows what's coming. Captain Carlos Mendez walks through the terminal like he owns it. Mid-40s, Hispanic, olive complexion, black hair slicked back perfectly. Athletic build filling out his uniform with calculated precision. 4 gold captain stripes catch fluorescent light. Tag Heuer chronograph gleams on his wrist. Designer aviator sunglasses perched on his uniform collar. Dark brown eyes scan the terminal with cold assessment. His jaw is set. His posture speaks. This is a man who's never questioned his own excellence. He's been flying for 18 years, a 380 captain for 6. Fleet's top technical pilot, every procedure memorized, every system mastered, every simulation passed with perfect scores. The airline loves his efficiency. His captain's report compliments his precision. His logbook shows 0 incidents. On paper, Carlos Mendez is flawless. In reality, he's something else entirely. He treats flight attendants like furniture, speaks to them like children, corrects them publicly, dismisses their concerns with a wave. His cruelty is calculated, private enough to avoid HR, public enough to establish dominance. Crew members request different flights when they see his name on the roster. He reaches the gate, nods at the gate agent, doesn't smile, doesn't need to, boards first, walks through the cabin without acknowledging passengers, climbs the stairs to the upper deck, enters the cockpit. First Officer Andreas Weber is already there, young, German, efficient. He greets Carlos, gets a grunt in return. Carlos settles into the left seat, begins his checks. The cockpit is pristine, screens glow, systems hum, everything perfect, except for one thing. The maintenance logbook shows a note from last night. Environmental control system, cabin pressure controller, minor fluctuation during descent. Technician inspected, found nothing concrete, cleared for service. Carlos reads it, dismisses it. Probably sensor error. Always sensor errors. He's flown with worse. He signs the log, moves on. Nina Volkov stands in the upper deck galley. Early 40s, Eastern European, fair complexion, blonde hair pulled into an elegant low bun. Ice blue eyes that miss nothing. Slim build. Dark blue uniform, immaculate. Red silk scarf tied perfectly. 5 gold service pins visible on her chest. 15 years with the airline. She's seen everything, flown every route, handled every emergency. Passengers trust her voice. Crew members seek her guidance. She never raises her voice, never loses composure. There's something else about Nina. Something in the way she looks at aircraft systems, the way her fingers trace control panels, the way she notices technical details flight attendants shouldn't notice. She wears a ring on her right hand, engineering ring, subtle. Most people don't recognize it. Before she became a flight attendant, Nina Volkov worked for Airbus, Toulouse facility, environmental control systems engineer, 5 years designing the exact systems that keep passengers breathing at 38,000 feet. She knows every valve, every sensor, every backup procedure, every manual override. She left engineering for personal reasons. Wanted to travel, needed change. Became a flight attendant at 40, took a massive pay cut, never mentioned her background, didn't seem relevant, until today. The cabin fills, passengers settle, overhead bins close, flight attendants perform safety demonstrations. Nina moves through her duties with practiced ease. She's worked with Carlos 3 times before, knows his reputation, stays out of his way, keeps interactions minimal, professional only. She's about to learn that won't be enough. Pre-flight briefing, upper deck galley. Carlos summons the senior cabin crew. Nina attends. He doesn't look at her, doesn't look at anyone, delivers instructions like reading a manual. Turbulence expected over the Alps. Keep seatbelt signs on longer. Meal service delayed. Questions? Silence. He's about to dismiss them when Nina speaks. Her voice is calm, professional. Captain, I noticed the maintenance log mentioned pressure controller fluctuations. Should we brief the crew on backup procedures? Carlos turns, his eyes go cold. Did I ask for your opinion? No, but the system is cleared. The technicians know their job. You know yours. Serve drinks, smile. That's what you're here for. The other flight attendants freeze. Nina holds his gaze, doesn't flinch. I understand, Captain. You were simply overstepping. Carlos steps closer. His voice drops, menacing. I've been flying A38s since before you learned how to open a soda can. Don't pretend you understand systems. Don't pretend you're qualified to question maintenance. Your job is passenger comfort. My job is flying this aircraft. Stay in your lane. Nina nods once. Professional. Yes, Captain. The briefing ends. Crew disperses. Nina returns to her duties. Her hands are steady. Her face is composed. But something shifts in her eyes. She's been dismissed before, disrespected before. This is different. This is a pilot ignoring a legitimate safety concern because it came from a flight attendant. She makes a mental note, watches, waits, pushback, engine start, taxi. The A380 rumbles toward runway 25L. Carlos handles controls smoothly. First Officer Weber manages communications. Tower clears them. Takeoff clearance. Carlos advances throttles. 4 Rolls-Royce engines roar. The massive aircraft accelerates. Rotation, liftoff. Frankfurt falls away below. Climb begins. Everything normal. But Nina notices something. 17 minutes after takeoff, passing through 22,000 feet, she's preparing the galley. There's a sound, subtle, high-pitched, coming from the environmental control panel near the rear galley. Most people wouldn't hear it. Nina does. She's heard that sound before in Airbus testing facilities. During pressure system stress tests, it's a relief valve actuating more frequently than it should, compensating for something. She listens carefully. The sound repeats every 40 seconds, too regular, too frequent. System is working harder than normal. She checks the cabin altitude display visible near the crew rest area. Shows 6,800 feet. Normal. Should be fine. But the relief valve says otherwise. System is maintaining pressure, but struggling. She considers telling Carlos. Remembers his response, decides against it. Not yet. She'll monitor. If it worsens, she'll try again. She documents the time mentally. 8:47 a.m., 22,000 feet, relief valve, abnormal cycling, cruise altitude, 38,000 feet. The A380 levels off, Alps below. Morning sun streams through cockpit windows. Carlos reviews flight plan. ETA Dubai, 3:24 p.m. local. On schedule. First Officer Weber seems relaxed. Carlos is satisfied. Perfect flight, like always. Nina moves through the upper deck cabin, checks passengers, smiles, professional. Inside, she's thinking. She's monitoring that sound. Still there, still abnormal. Frequency increasing every 35 seconds now. She needs to tell him. She walks toward the cockpit, stops herself. He'll humiliate her again. She needs evidence, something concrete. She makes another mental note. We'll document everything. If this develops into a problem, she'll have a record. An hour into the flight, 9:47 a.m. Nina is preparing meal service when Carlos emerges from the cockpit. He walks past her, doesn't acknowledge her, heads to the lavatory, returns, stops at the galley, looks at her with those cold eyes. His voice is quiet, meant only for her. Earlier, your question about the pressure system. Don't ever question my judgment in front of my crew again. Nina turns, meets his gaze. I wasn't questioning your judgment. I was raising a safety concern. You were undermining my authority. Captain, with respect. You don't get to with respect me. You're a flight attendant. I'm a captain. That's not a debate. That's hierarchy, and you will respect it. Nina feels something rising in her chest, not anger, something colder. I do respect hierarchy, Captain. I also respect safety protocols that... Safety protocols. Carlos laughs. Sharp. Cruel. You think because you've done a few evacuation drills, you understand aviation safety? You're pathetic. You're weak. You serve drinks and pretend you're important. You're not. You're replaceable. There are thousands of flight attendants, one captain. Remember that. The words hit like physical blows. Nina's face remains composed, but something happens. Her eyes water, not from sadness, from rage she can't express, from years of being dismissed, from knowing she has more technical knowledge in her little finger than he'll ever have, and being unable to say it. A single tear rolls down her cheek. She doesn't wipe it, just stands there. Carlos sees it, smiles, cold satisfaction. That's what I thought. He turns, walks back to the cockpit, leaves her standing there. Senior flight attendant Maria sees it, approaches Nina. "Are you okay?" Nina wipes her face, nods. "I'm fine." Her voice is steady, but her hands shake slightly as she returns to work. She's not fine. She's been broken, publicly, privately, doesn't matter, the damage is done. Carlos Mendez made Nina Volkov cry. He thinks he's won. He's wrong, because 18 minutes from now at 10:05 a.m. over Austrian airspace, the cabin pressure system is going to fail completely. Carlos is going to panic. First Officer Weber is going to freeze, and Nina Volkov is going to walk into that cockpit and save 390 lives using knowledge Carlos doesn't have. She's going to make him beg. But he doesn't know that yet. Right now, he sits in his captain's seat, satisfied, in control, perfect. The A380 flies smooth. Systems appear normal. He's already forgotten about the flight attendant he made cry. That's his first mistake. His second mistake is not listening to the environmental system, because deep in the aircraft's belly, pressure sensors are failing. Backup systems are compensating, but compensation has limits, and those limits are about to be reached. 2 hours into the flight, 10:47 a.m., the A380 cruises over Austria. Blue sky, smooth air, passengers relax, business class sleeps, economy watches movies. The cabin altitude reads 7,200 feet, still acceptable, still safe, but Nina notices something. The relief valve sound changed. No longer rhythmic, now irregular, cycling every 20 seconds, then 15, then 25. The system is hunting, struggling to maintain pressure, compensating erratically. She moves to the crew rest area, checks the environmental control panel display. Cabin altitude now 7,400 feet, climbed 600 feet in 2 hours. That's wrong, should be stable. She watches for 3 minutes. It climbs to 7,450 feet, then drops to 7,380, then jumps to 7,520. The system is unstable, fighting itself. She needs to report this. She walks to the cockpit door, knocks. Intercom. "Captain, I need to speak with you." Carlos's voice comes through, irritated. "What is it?" "Cabin altitude is fluctuating. Environmental system sounds abnormal." Silence. Then, "Cabin altitude is within parameters. We're monitoring everything. Return to your duties." Nina stares at the intercom. He didn't even look, didn't check, just dismissed her. She considers pushing harder, remembers the galley, the tears, the humiliation. She steps back, returns to her station, but she doesn't stop watching. She pulls out her phone, sets a timer, documents every reading. 10:51 a.m. Cabin altitude 7,580 feet. 10:54 a.m. 7,650 feet. 10:57 a.m. 7,720 feet. Climbing. Something is failing, slowly, quietly, but definitely failing. Inside the cockpit, Carlos reviews the navigation display. First Officer Weber handles communications. The environmental control system page on the center display shows green. All parameters normal. Cabin altitude 7,600 feet. Pack flow normal. Temperature normal. Everything perfect. Except there's a small notation at the bottom. Auto pressure, neutral, degraded mode. Carlos sees it, dismisses it. Degraded mode just means the backup controller took over. That's what backups are for. System still functions, still safe, nothing to worry about. He's flown with degraded systems dozens of times. This is routine. But what Carlos doesn't know is that degraded mode means the primary pressure controller failed completely. The backup controller is now handling everything, and the backup controller has a flaw. A software bug that Airbus identified 18 months ago. A service bulletin was issued. The fix requires replacing a control module, takes 4 hours. Most airlines scheduled it during heavy maintenance. This aircraft was due for the update next month. Carlos doesn't know this. The maintenance log didn't mention it. And right now that backup controller is working at 94% capacity. When it hits 100%, it will shut down for self-protection. Then there will be no pressure control at all. 11 a.m. Nina is serving drinks in business class when she feels it. Pressure in her ears, subtle, like descending too fast. She swallows, clears her ears, looks around. Some passengers shifting, uncomfortable. Not alarmed yet, just noticing something. She checks her phone, the timer app she's running. Cabin altitude now 8,100 feet, that's high. Upper limit of comfortable. She walks quickly to the crew panel, checks again. 8,150 feet and climbing 5 feet per minute. Slow enough that most people won't notice immediately, fast enough to become dangerous. She returns to the cockpit door, knocks harder. Intercom. Captain, cabin altitude is now over 8,000 feet and climbing. Carlos's voice explodes through the speaker. I told you to stop bothering me with this. The system is functioning. If you interrupt my cockpit operations one more time with your paranoid observations, I will write you up for interference. Am I clear? Nina closes her eyes, takes a breath. Crystal clear, Captain. She steps back, but she doesn't stop. She briefs the other flight attendants, quietly. Watch for passenger symptoms, headaches, dizziness, shortness of breath. Report to me immediately. They look confused but nod. Nina returns to the galley, starts preparing. She knows what's coming. She's seen pressure system failures in simulations, in test environments. This is exactly how they begin. Slow, incremental, then catastrophic. And right then, something unexpected happens. A passenger in seat 12K presses the call button. Senior flight attendant Maria responds. The passenger is pale, sweating. I can't catch my breath. My chest feels tight. Maria checks him. Early 60s, overweight, he's breathing rapidly. Shallow breaths. Maria calls Nina. Nina arrives, looks at the passenger, recognizes the symptoms immediately, not a heart attack. Hypoxia, altitude sickness. She checks her phone. Cabin altitude 8,400 feet, equivalent to standing on a mountain. For a healthy person, uncomfortable. For someone with respiratory issues, dangerous. Nina makes a decision. She opens the overhead bin, retrieves a portable oxygen bottle, puts a mask on the passenger. Breathe normally. You're going to be fine. The passenger's color improves slightly, but Nina knows this is a Band-Aid. The real problem is the cabin altitude, and it's still climbing. She doesn't go to the cockpit this time. She calls on the internal crew phone. First Officer Weber answers. Nina speaks quickly. First Officer, we have a passenger on oxygen due to altitude-related symptoms. Cabin altitude is over 8,400 feet. Can you verify environmental system status? Weber sounds concerned. One moment. She hears him talking to Carlos. Muffled argument. Then Weber returns. Captain says cabin altitude is within acceptable range. He says the passenger probably has a pre-existing condition. Nina's voice stays calm. First Officer, I'm reading 8,400 feet and climbing. That's not acceptable range. Can you please verify on your instruments? More muffled conversation. Then Carlos takes the phone. His voice is ice. Listen carefully. I'm looking at my instruments right now. Everything is normal. Your panel is probably reading wrong. Those crew area displays are notoriously inaccurate. The passenger has a medical issue unrelated to cabin pressure. Handle it. Do not call this cockpit again unless someone is dying. Understood? Nina stares at the phone. Understood, Captain. She hangs up, looks at Maria. Get all the portable oxygen bottles ready. We're going to need them. Things are about to get much worse. 11:14 a.m., another call button, seat 24F. Young woman, dizzy, nauseous. Nina brings oxygen. Then 31B, elderly man, severe headache. Then 18A, child, lethargic, not responding well to mother. Nina and her crew are moving through the cabin with oxygen bottles. Passengers are starting to notice, whispers spreading. What's happening? Why do so many people need oxygen? Is something wrong with the air? Nina checks her phone. Cabin altitude 8,850 feet, equivalent to standing at the top of a ski resort. Healthy adults feel it. Anyone with respiratory issues, cardiovascular problems, or age vulnerabilities is suffering. She counts 6 passengers on supplemental oxygen. The portable bottles won't last long, maybe 20 minutes each. She needs the cabin altitude to drop. Now, she calls the cockpit one final time. Weber answers, "First officer, we now have 6 passengers requiring oxygen. Symptoms consistent with altitude sickness. I'm formally requesting descent or verification of environmental system." Weber's voice is tight. "Stand by." Long pause. She hears alarms in the background, muted. Then Carlos's voice, not to her, to Weber. "It's just a sensor. Reset the controller." Then to Nina. "We're aware of a minor system fluctuation. We're handling it. Continue passenger care." Nina hangs up, looks at the crew. They're scared now. They see it too. Something is very wrong. She makes a decision, walks to the upper deck crew rest area, opens the technical panel most flight attendants don't even know exists. Inside are manual overrides, emergency controls, backup systems. She studies them. Her engineering background floods back. She knows these systems, designed them. If Carlos won't act, she needs to be ready to act for him. Inside the cockpit, things are not as calm as Carlos pretended. First Officer Weber is staring at the environmental control display. "Captain, we've dropped to degraded mode. Cabin altitude is 8,900 feet. We should consider descending." Carlos shakes his head. "Degraded mode is still functional. We're fine. Probably just sensor drift. We'll reset it." He reaches for the controller reset switch, flips it. The system recycles. For 30 seconds, everything looks better. Cabin altitude stabilizes, then starts climbing again. Faster now. 8,950, 9,000, 9,050. An amber caution light illuminates. Cabin altitude. Carlos stares at it, jaw tight. "That shouldn't be on." Weber's voice rises. "Captain, we're passing 9,000 feet. Regulations require passenger oxygen deployment at 10,000. We need to descend now." Carlos grabs the radio, calls air traffic control. "Austrian control, Emirates flight, 332, we're experiencing a minor environmental issue. Request descent to flight level 280. His voice is calm, professional. Like this is routine. Air traffic responds. "Emirates 332, unable immediate descent, traffic below you. Descend to flight level 320, expect lower in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Weber does the math. At current rate, cabin altitude will hit 10,000 feet in 4 minutes. They need to descend now, faster than ATC authorized. He looks at Carlos. "Captain, we need to declare an emergency. Get priority descent." Carlos's face hardens. "We are not declaring an emergency over a sensor issue. We'll take the assigned descent." Pride. That's what stops him. Pride and reputation. An emergency declaration means paperwork, investigation, questions, possible blame. Carlos Mendez doesn't make mistakes, doesn't need emergency descent. He's handled worse. He can handle this. 11:19 a.m. cabin altitude 9,400 feet, 9 passengers on oxygen, children crying, adults panicking. Nina moves through the cabin projecting calm she doesn't feel. She's calculating. At this rate, 4 minutes until passenger oxygen masks deploy automatically. 6 minutes until the cabin altitude becomes dangerous even with masks. 8 minutes until unconsciousness for vulnerable passengers. Carlos needs to descend now, but he won't. She can feel it. She knows his type. prideful, stubborn, would rather die than admit error. She makes a decision that will define the next 30 minutes. She opens her phone, takes photos of the crew panel displays, timestamps, evidence. Then she records a voice memo. 11:19 a.m. Flight 332. Cabin altitude 9,400 feet and climbing. 9 passengers on supplemental oxygen. Captain has been notified multiple times, refusing descent. If this escalates, the record will show I tried. She saves it, sends it to her personal email, cloud backup. Whatever happens next, the truth will survive. And then at exactly 11:21 a.m. over the Austrian Alps at 38,000 feet, the backup pressure controller hits 100% capacity, shuts down for thermal protection. The cabin pressure system stops controlling completely, and Captain Carlos Mendez's perfect flight becomes a nightmare. The cockpit erupts in sound. Master warning. Cabin altitude, cabin altitude. Red lights, alarms. The cabin altitude display shows 9,850 feet and climbing rapidly, 150 feet per minute. Carlos stares at the instruments. His hands freeze on the controls. His mind races. This isn't a sensor. This is real. The system actually failed. First Officer Weber is already reaching for the emergency descent checklist. Captain, emergency descent now! But Carlos hesitates just 2 seconds. 2 seconds of pride fighting reality. 2 seconds of his reputation flashing before his eyes. 2 seconds too long. The cabin altitude hits 10,000 feet. Throughout the A380, passenger oxygen masks deploy with a loud bang. Yellow masks drop from ceiling panels. 390 passengers gasp, scream, panic erupts. Parents grab children. Business travelers drop laptops. The cabin becomes chaos. And in the galley, Nina Volkov hears the deployment, feels the pressure change. She looks at her crew. They're terrified. She's not. She's been preparing for this moment since Frankfurt. She walks calmly to the cockpit door, doesn't knock, uses her crew key, opens it, steps inside uninvited. Carlos is fumbling with checklists. Weber is trying to declare emergency. Neither of them is handling the actual problem. Nina looks at the environmental control panel, sees exactly what's wrong, and speaks for the first time with the voice of an engineer, not a flight attendant. Captain, the backup pressure controller has shut down. You need to switch to manual mode immediately or this cabin will reach 14,000 feet before you descend below it. Carlos turns, his face is red, furious, terrified. Get out of my cockpit! Nina doesn't move. I'm an environmental systems engineer. I designed this system, and I'm the only person on this aircraft who can fix it. So you have 2 choices. Let me help, or explain to 390 families why you let your pride kill their loved ones. Carlos stares at her. His mouth opens. No words come out. Because right now, watching his instruments fail, hearing passengers scream, feeling control slip away, Captain Carlos Mendez realizes something. He doesn't know how to fix this, and the flight attendant he made cry does. The cockpit goes silent just for 2 seconds. Master warning still blaring. Cabin altitude passing 10,200 feet. Passengers screaming through the door. But in this moment, everything stops. Carlos looks at Nina, really looks at her for the first time, sees something he missed. The engineering ring, the calm in her eyes, the absolute certainty in her voice. This isn't a flight attendant offering an opinion. This is an expert stating fact. First Officer Weber breaks the silence. Captain, we need help. Let her try. Carlos's face contorts. Pride wars with survival. His voice cracks. You're an engineer? Nina steps toward the environmental control panel. Airbus Toulouse. Environmental control systems, 5 years. I designed the exact pressure system failing right now, and I know the manual override procedure. Do I have your permission to proceed, Captain? The word permission cuts deep. She's asking, following protocol, even now, even after everything. It makes Carlos's humiliation complete. He nods, can't speak, just nods. Nina moves fast, sits in the observer seat behind Carlos, pulls up the environmental control system page on the center display, studies it for 5 seconds, sees exactly what she expected. Primary controller failed. Backup controller thermal shutdown. System in full manual mode, but nobody selected it. The aircraft is losing pressure with no automated response. Cabin altitude now 10,450 feet, climbing 180 feet per minute. In 8 minutes, passengers will start losing consciousness. In 12, serious brain damage risk for vulnerable individuals. She speaks clearly, calm. First officer, initiate emergency descent checklist. Get us down to flight level 250 immediately. Captain, declare Mayday. We need priority clearance. Neither man moves fast enough. She raises her voice slightly, still controlled, but command is in it. Now, move! Weber jumps, grabs the radio. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Austrian Control, Emirates Flight 332. Experiencing cabin pressure failure. Emergency descent to flight level 250. We are turning right heading 090, descending now. A TC responds instantly. Emirates 332. Emergency descent approved. Turn right heading 090. Descend flight level 250. All traffic cleared. Carlos pushes the yoke forward. The A380 pitches nose down. Throttles to idle. Speed brakes extend. The massive aircraft descends at 3,500 feet per minute. Passengers feel their stomachs lift, more screaming, but Nina's already moved past that. She's focused on the environmental panel, reaches for the control interface. Her fingers fly across touchscreen options most pilots never access. She navigates to manual mode, selects it. The system responds. Manual pressure control active. Now comes the critical part. Nina needs to manually control cabin pressure during an emergency descent. Too slow, passengers suffer hypoxia. Too fast, ears rupture. Sinuses damage. She needs precision. She looks at the descent rate, 3,400 feet per minute aircraft descent. She calculates, cabin should descend at 1,800 feet per minute, maintains safe differential. She inputs commands, uses the manual outflow valve control, percentage open. She sets it at 42%, watches. Cabin altitude stops climbing, holds at 10,550 feet, then starts descending 10,500, 10,400, 10,300, stabilizing. Weber watches the instruments, amazed. Cabin altitude descending, differential pressure stabilizing. How are you doing that? Nina doesn't look up, eyes locked on displays. Manual outflow valve control. You have to match cabin descent rate to aircraft descent rate while maintaining structural limits. Too fast, and the fuselage can't handle differential. Too slow, and passengers don't get pressure relief. Her hands adjust the valve. 44% open. Cabin descent rate increases slightly. I've done this in simulators 100 times. Never thought I'd do it for real. Carlos sits frozen, watching this flight attendant, this engineer, save his aircraft, doing what he couldn't do, knowing what he didn't know. His hands grip the yoke, but he's not really flying anymore. He's just following descent profile while Nina does the real work. His voice is small, broken. When did you... I left Airbus 10 years ago, became a flight attendant because I wanted to travel, see the world, experience aviation from a different angle. I never mentioned my background because it didn't seem relevant. Nina adjusts the valve again. 46% open. Cabin altitude passing 9,800 feet. Until today, the A380 descends through 32,000 feet. Cabin altitude drops to 9,200 feet. Passengers still have oxygen masks on, but panic is subsiding. Parents hold children. Flight attendants move through the cabin reassuring people. Maria's voice on the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a controlled descent due to a cabin pressure issue. Please keep your oxygen masks on until the seatbelt sign is off. Remain seated. Everything is under control. Under control because Nina Volkov is in the cockpit doing work the captain can't do. 25,000 feet aircraft altitude. Cabin altitude 7,800 feet, safe range. Nina closes the outflow valve to 38%, slows cabin descent, matches aircraft rate, perfect synchronization. First Officer Weber is documenting everything, writing notes, times, actions, Nina's procedures. This will all go in the report, and the report will show exactly who saved this flight. 18,000 feet aircraft altitude. Cabin altitude 5,200 feet. Comfortable. Passengers breathing normally. Nina waits until 5,000 cabin altitude, then makes the PA herself. Uses the cockpit intercom. Her voice is steady, professional. Ladies and gentlemen, cabin pressure has been stabilized. You may now remove your oxygen masks. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened. We are diverting to Vienna for precautionary landing. We will arrive in approximately 18 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation. She hangs up the handset, looks at Carlos. He's staring at his hands, shaking. The adrenaline is wearing off. Reality is setting in. He nearly killed 390 people because he was too proud to listen, too arrogant to check, too cruel to respect. And the woman he humiliated just saved him. Nina could let him sit in that realization. She doesn't. Captain, you need to fly this approach. First officer needs to handle communications. I need to check on passengers. Are you capable of continuing? Carlos looks at her. His eyes are red. Yes, I can fly. A pause, then barely audible. Thank you. Nina stands, straightens her uniform. You're welcome, Captain. She turns to leave. Carlos speaks again. His voice cracks. Please, I need you to stay. What if the system fails again? I don't know how to do what you just did. There it is, the begging, the admission. Captain Carlos Mendez, who called her pathetic and weak, is begging her to stay because he can't handle his own aircraft. Nina could walk out. She's done her job. She doesn't. I'll monitor from the observer seat through landing. If anything changes, I'll handle it. Carlos nods. Can't meet her eyes. Thank you. The approach into Vienna is smooth. Nina watches the environmental system like a hawk, makes small adjustments, keeps everything stable. First Officer Weber handles ATC, explains the situation, requests emergency services standing by, standard procedure, fire trucks and ambulances. The A380 lands gently on runway 11, rolls out, taxis to the gate, shuts down. Passengers applaud, thank the crew, don't know the full story yet. They will. The moment engines shut down, Vienna Ground Operations Boards, Airline Management, Austrian Aviation Authority, everyone wants answers. Carlos tries to brief them. His voice wavers. He can't explain the technical details. First Officer Weber interrupts. Sir, Flight Attendant Volkov manually controlled cabin pressure through the emergency descent. She has engineering background. She should explain. Nina steps forward, introduces herself. Nina Volkov, Senior Flight Attendant, former Environmental Control Systems Engineer for Airbus. I can walk you through exactly what happened. And she does. Technical, precise, complete. She shows them her phone documentation, timestamps, cabin altitude readings, her repeated warnings to the captain, the maintenance log notation about pressure controller, the backup system failure, her manual intervention, everything. The officials listen, take notes, thank her, then turn to Carlos. Captain, we need your statement. Carlos tells them everything, leaves nothing out, including his dismissal of Nina's concerns, his refusal to descend, his inability to handle the manual system. He's broken. Professional facade shattered. He knows what's coming. 6 passengers were transported to hospital for observation. Hypoxia symptoms, released within hours. No permanent damage. The A380 is grounded for inspection. Pressure control system completely replaced. Service bulletin compliance verified. Aircraft returns to service 4 days later. But Captain Carlos Mendez does not return with it. 3 months later, Carlos sits in a conference room at Emirates headquarters in Dubai. Across from him, Chief Pilot Fleet Safety Manager, HR Director. The investigation report is complete. Findings are clear. Carlos violated multiple procedures, ignored crew safety concerns, delayed emergency response, put passengers at risk. The chief pilot speaks. Captain Mendez, your actions on Flight 332 constitute serious violations of our safety protocols. Your license suspension by EASA stands for 12 months minimum. Emirates is terminating your employment effective immediately. You may reapply after license reinstatement, but I'll be honest, I don't see us bringing you back. Carlos nods. Expected this. I understand. There's one more thing. The chief pilot slides a document across the table. The passenger lawsuits, several families are suing, they're naming you personally. Our legal team will handle it, but you're advised to get your own attorney. Carlos leaves the building. No longer a captain, no longer employed, no longer certain he'll ever fly again. He drives to his apartment. Smaller now, couldn't afford the villa after the termination. Sits on the couch, looks at his logbook, 12,000 flight hours, 18 years gone, because he couldn't respect a flight attendant who knew more than him. Meanwhile, Nina Volkov stands in Emirates Training Center. She's no longer wearing a flight attendant uniform. She's wearing business attire. Name tag reads Nina Volkov, Safety Training Manager. The airline offered her the position 2 weeks after Flight 332. Recognized her expertise, wanted her knowledge in their safety programs. She accepted. She stands before a class of new captains, teaches them about crew resource management, about respecting all voices in the aircraft, about checking ego at the cockpit door. 3 months ago, she tells them, I was a flight attendant on a flight where the captain's pride nearly killed everyone. He ignored my safety concerns because he thought I was just there to serve drinks. He learned the hard way that knowledge doesn't care about rank. Expertise doesn't come only from gold stripes. Some of the smartest people on your aircraft might be in the cabin. Listen to them, always. The captains listen. Take notes. They've all heard the story. Flight 332 is now case study material. Aviation forums discussed it for weeks. Industry publications wrote about it. The flight attendant engineer who saved 390 lives. Nina became quietly famous. She doesn't enjoy the attention, just wants to make sure it never happens again. First Officer Andreas Weber was promoted to captain, different aircraft type. Fresh start. He visits Nina sometimes, thanks her. You saved my career too. If we'd crashed, I'd be done. Nina smiles. You were ready to do the right thing. That's what matters. The passengers from Flight 332 organized a fundraiser, bought Nina a gift, a plaque, engraved, to Nina Volkov, who kept us breathing when the sky forgot how, with gratitude from the 390 souls you saved. She keeps it in her office, next to her engineering degree from Toulouse. And somewhere in Dubai, Carlos Mendez applies for a dispatcher position, ground work, no cockpit. He's learned his lesson. Pride cost him everything. He'll never fly again. Not as captain, maybe never at all. Every airline checks references. Every airline sees Flight 332 in his record. Nobody's hiring the pilot who ignored his crew and needed a flight attendant to save his passengers. The aviation industry changed after Flight 332. Emirates implemented new protocols. Cabin crew can now directly contact safety managers during flight if captain ignores legitimate concerns. Other airlines adopted similar policies. EASA issued a safety bulletin. Value all safety observations, regardless of source. The story became teaching material in aviation schools worldwide.